Hello, guys, welcome once more to Hollywood Recapped. Today I'm going to explain to you the movie Silent Hours spoiler ahead and take notice of it. After a therapy session, we see a couple getting intimate in the bedroom and eventually, she gets tied to the bed before the man goes at her. Meanwhile, we see John in his car as he watches a deal go down. Afterward, he heads on to the docks to get aboard on one of the boats with a bag of his own. As soon as inside he grabs all of the hidden cameras. Once he gets home he compiles the pictures of the couple having intercourse and places the videotape in a brown envelope. On the different side of city Rachel is hosting a dinner and the doorbell rings suddenly. When she comes to the door she finds John there and he apologizes for being late. Once at the table some buddies ask John about how his work is going and he assures them that everything's flawlessly normal. One of the friends speaks to John about a cassette they discovered in their house from the preceding owner and she asks him to take a look at it. After the dinner, Rachel notices John looking at her with a certain look in his eyes. And they head to the bedroom. It is simply this guy's job to sell sex tapes and he gets money paid to spy on people. On top of that, he makes use of the moves he sees on the tapes in actual life. Whatever his job is sounds like a dream job for some people. Once they're done with their intercourse, John heads out to deal with any other job. Now that he is at the vicinity he places the tape in from the friend and it turns out to simply be an old answering machine recording. After this he heads to the fish market to begin recording one of the employees. After going back home to go over the material we see that John's back in his therapy session with Dr. Catherine. It turns out that he is more of a private investigator that spies on people to confirm or deny people's suspicions. He is actually cheaters however a one-man crew. I sense like that would in reality wear on you. After a while likely fun at first however after time you possibly start to lose belief in people. Later, he grants the news of his dishonest wife to Mr. Bowles and he figures out that it is clearly Mr. Bowles' son that is screwing around with the wife. After this visit Mr. Bowles goes to his boat to find out a woman's body chopped into separate pieces. John heads to a carrier to talk with the commander. He doesn't even let the man discuss about why he asked them there. He figures out that he's being hired to figure out whether or not the wife is having an affair with a lower rank soldier. Again in the therapy session we discover out that John genuinely left the Navy due to not being in a position to lift out his duties. Quickly detectives show up to ask for pictures of Mr. Bowles' wife and her enjoyable night. When he is brought in for questioning. He finds out what occurred to the woman on the boat. Afterwards he goes again to work on monitoring the commander's wife. This female simply walked from her apartment to her car. John follows her to an arcade where she loses him and drives off. After getting the security tape from the protection employee he figures out who her car was once registered to and then he goes for a massage to talk to his ex-wife about the gazette she delivered him. He explains that the tape's been wiped. Then things pass in a different direction. Dawn simply straight up unzips her shirt and pulls her down to make that it turns out that his ex and they broke up because he began dating Rachel who's her best friend. And this man has no control over himself. It gets tough to comprehend precisely where his loyalties lie and it really is if he has any at all. While she describes her instinct on the answering machine, she mentions how she used to be really able to see a dead female with all her appendages cut off. This seems to be sufficient to pique John's interest however he moves on. The next day as he is driving he notices that a person's following him through city but they ultimately stop. When he gets to his destination he finds the car that the commander's spouse had been driving. He comes across a dead woman's body in the woods, it appears to be the commander's wife. After getting brought in by the detectives, he is questioned about his involvement in connection to the commander's wife. And after that he finds out who the victim on the boat without a doubt was. It was Rachel, who was murdered. Later John goes to meet his reporter buddy and he asks for a list of similar woman murders over the remaining 10 years. Afterwards John goes to Rachel's parents and he finds out that they told the police about a time that he harmed Rachel badly. Now that John is aware of that he is the police's top suspect, he digs a little deeper and he breaks into the commander's residence and searches for connections. While he is there he does not see that anyone else is sneaking out of the house. At the same time after listening to the floorboards creak downstairs. He sneaks outdoor the bedroom window and finds that the wife comes into a room to change right in front of him. She does not see him through the glass though. After making it downstairs he hops in the vehicle however he is followed by the same vehicle from before. Later John goes to a local radio station where he finds a friend that he asks to recover whatever messages got wiped off of the answering machine tape. Then when he leaves, he calls his reporter pal to set up a meeting and he ultimately notices his tail again but when he goes his very own way the car he thought was tailing him doesn't follow. He makes his way to the commander's residence and Sorrel answers the door. Sorrel explains that she's really Rosemary's twin sister and John finds this as a grand chance to discover out more to go along with. John actually begins hitting on her for a moment he cannot hold it in his pants. Then after discovering out that Rosemary had a similar birthmark to her, he heads out. At least he's really doing his job after all. After he leaves he spots Sorrel take hold of a briefcase of cash and she takes a boat to the carrier. Then he heads to the coroner's office where he confirms that the body of the second victim does have Rosemary's birthmark. After speaking to the detective they each confirm that the only reason the killer has something to do with John. After calling in a few more favors John finds Sorrel leaving a country home and he follows her back to the apartment. He asks her what's actually going on, she comes on to him, and we flash beforehand to the detective as they go to answer a third murder. It's absolutely Sorrel in her own bathtub, dead. I'm finding it tough to assume of a way John can logically get out of this. Whether he did it or not the whole thing points to him so flawlessly that they nearly do not need any hard proof barring that who simply desires to frame John like that. John goes to set up an arrangement with a nearby boat captain, but when he gets home, the detectives take hold of him before he gets inside. As the car takes John to the police station the detectives look around John's residence, and while they search his boat they find the identical type of rope that was used in the course of the rapes and murders. When it comes time for questioning the detective is relentless with their accusations, and John defends himself as best as he can. With the fact after listening to about the rope in his boat, John tells them that he is being set up. Once John is released, he goes to the funeral of Rachel, and he looks around to see if there may be anyone he may want to see trying to frame him for all of this. He additionally spots the detective standing by the church. At the reception he looks at his ex-girlfriend and the two of them go out for a walk. When he gets home he finds information about a service member that is gone AWOL. When he goes again to Toby, his ex, she catches a glimpse of his mind. Then they go right back to flirting and within seconds they're going at it. That's actually how all the other ladies died. He's like the lover of dying or something, each and every other woman ended up dead by the subsequent morning. Now by the time they're done, she reminds him that she nevertheless has a key to his house and should have killed Rachel for taking him. She actually just left Rachel's funeral and now she is going to blab all of that to Rachel's boyfriend, who's a private detective and additionally the prime suspect. Later John heads out with the boatman to check out an abandoned station and he is interrupted when some other figure appears. John trails the person to the top and after listening to a blood-curdling scream, the figure leaves with a large bag on their back. After that, John heads again to the top to see what made the scream from before and he finds his buddy Harrison with his throat sliced. Later John goes to the commander and wonders why he sent him to solve a case that did not matter. All of this was due to the fact of someone that was blackmailing him because he was once profiteering. He truly only desired to know the name of the man that was blackmailing him. Then John figured out that he was in reality having an affair with a twin sister Sorrel. It turns out that the commander is the one that set him up all these years. And after finding out that John got frisky with Sorrel before she died, he places a gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. When the detectives show up, John tells them the entirety that he has found out. However in the end, the detectives are recording everything so they can compare his voice to that on the answering machine. At night John sleeps peacefully, but someone breaks into his residence in the middle of the storm. Don't worry, it's simply Tobin. She warned him that she nevertheless had a key someplace and surprisingly she's not dead. But as she gets nearer John notices an uncommon scent on her scarf, however she turns his interest again to the matters. At other hand, when we see John talking to his therapist again. She mentions that a lot of killers actually have post-traumatic amnesia and she tips to the possibility of him virtually committing the murders. During some blackouts, it turns out that he without a doubt spent some time in a mental hospital to deal with PTSD and when he gets released he heads straight to an apartment to take care of business on Good Friday. That night John comes down to join the landlord during dinner and she simply keeps coming on to him. Afterwards he ends up sleeping with her and in the morning he finds her dead and chopped up in the bathtub. After John cleans up he listens to the answering machine and it turns out that he's the one that left a message on the machine and also the one that deleted it. When we flash back to the present we see John ready to give his testimony, however the detectives come in and play his voice from the answering machine and the recording from the last time they spoke. They arrest him on the spot for the murder of over 5 women. When the attorneys meet to evaluate the case, they talk about that John should endure a psychiatric assessment and that is where we see him first come into the therapist's office for the first time. It turns out that Dr. Catherine's actually recording their sessions to give the court her assessment of his psyche. Meanwhile, the police notice something massive in the case and Toby's actually missing. John additionally figures out the whole thing from the therapist's office and they all figured out that it was certainly Toby's husband that set John up. When Mr. Wright all at once shows up at his house, the police search his vehicle to discover the murder weapons and trophies stuffed in his trunk. This is the biggest stretch in all the stretches ever. Sure enough it all checks out this way, but it is still pushing it when you think about it. They even find Toby's dead body in another tub. Even the police are confused at how all this adds up. Finally John is let go and he heads home to relax in peace. Simply what do you actually think John did next? He goes to the therapist's residence and gets jiggy with her. He simply can't end screwing around. The detectives cannot just let the case die. Now it turns out that the one detective has a thing for private detectives, in particular John, because he observed out some filth on her years in the past. It turns out that her partner found the same proof on John's computer and he deleted it when he went through it. Meanwhile, someone can be seen retrieving the stolen cash from underwater, and the subsequent day John's on his boat with Dr. Catherine. The two of them head out to sea and John mentions business that he has to cope with elsewhere. After they sail for a while their engines totally cease and John gets knocked out when he goes to take a look at on the problem. When he comes to, he finds himself tied up and Dr. Catherine holding a knife to his face. Twist number: who knows what strange connection does she have to the story? She's psycho and wants to comprehend where the cash is. Right enough for this storyline. As she teases him for a second, John manages to get unfastened and he shows her how he truly knew that she was involved. The whole time it turns out that John truly did kill all the ladies, the only one that he did not kill was the man from the abandoned ship. He even killed his very own mother, who used to be the landlord. We see boat float alone in the middle of the sea. The movie ends here. See you in the next explanation video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, for it helps a lot for the channel to grow.